Hello, friends and neighbors. My name is Bo Sanders, and if you are just tuning in for the first time, I want to invite you into a conversation that I'm hoping to host this week. It's going to be a 4-part series, and every day we're going to try and chip away at one element of this current situation that we find ourselves in by trying to answer the question, why do things seem so bad right now? I take a little bit different of an approach to this, and so I have a background in theology. My PhD work included some sociology elements, and so I have been working on issues of globalization and social imaginaries, the way that we picture the world. And so I wanted to offer some tools that I hope you might find helpful this week, and I want to do it in a 4-part step. Today I just want to introduce the ideas and give you a picture that I think might get the conversation started so that we can address some of the elements that are contributing to our current cultural situation. Tomorrow I want to talk about how fragmented and fractured our society is and where that comes from and how it impacts us. The next day, I want to talk about how there is no neutral position anymore. You can't assume anything. And then the 4th installment is going to be addressing identity politics and why it feels like everyone is for themselves. It's one of those moments in history where things seem to have shifted and changed a little bit. And indeed, I am going to argue that they have. But today I wanted to say that I think there are 3 contributing elements that would be helpful for us to get on the table first and to talk about how they interact with each other. The first is consumerism, the second is globalization, and the third is pluralism. Now, those 3 may not initially seem to have a lot to do with each other or maybe the situation that we're addressing, but the way that they interact and actually mutually inflame each other is the part that I'm interested in addressing. So consumerism actually is based in individualism. It creates the individual. In the last 400 or 500 years, we have come to imagine ourselves in very different ways than our ancestors have. And the way that we conceptualize life and the good and success and belonging, community, family, everything has been impacted by this individualism that has settled in, but it's not independent of our larger framework of capitalism. Consumerism is the water that we swim in. It's actually so assumed that it often isn't even named or addressed, and I find that fascinating. It's actually second nature to us. In fact, I know people who claim to be Christians who can go a day or whole days without praying, but can't go a whole day without spending or buying something. So the real religion of the West, one would have to conclude, is some form of consumerism capitalism, even though it has a paint job or a veneer of Christian language or behavior. That's something we're going to have to address. That in and of itself isn't necessarily the problem, but it actually is kind of the wood on which the gasoline of globalization comes. Globalization is a phenomenon where our world has gotten smaller, they say, but what it has done is it has put our communities in proximity and connection as never before. When we go shopping, when we go out, when we go to send our kids to school, whatever it is, when we're doing our business, our daily stuff, we are coming into contact with people who maybe are part of different religions, have different worldviews, different formulations of community and belonging, and we are in closer proximity. The problem is that they don't overlap. They may not be compatible. And so even though we are side by side and have access to products and people from all over the world, we don't have a mental framework or an internal orientation that allows us to interact. And that's where pluralism comes in. Pluralism is a posture towards the other. And I have this thing I'm working on called one another, but it's a little bit of a hyphenated phrase. You can see it in the blog there, that I think is clumsy enough to catch people's attention in order to illustrate. And I know it's clumsy at first, but after a while, I find it very helpful to structure and frame it that way, because that one and otherness is the element that feels so alienating and is causing so much division and animosity in our culture. And until we learn to address that, I don't know how we're going to find a way forward. Our political environment, our economic situation, our neighborhoods and communities, our policing strategies, our for-profit prisons, so many things in our culture seem like they are insurmountable and maybe don't even dovetail together. They don't work together. And so it feels very fractured and fragmented. And so I found this picture by my neighbor, Jeff. He had painted this picture, and I find it really helpful. And so I'm going to put it up on the screen, and I'm going to tell you why this thing speaks to me so much. These circles, in and of themselves, our circles have diversity within them. And that's something that is worth stating, is that there's no homogeneous assumption anymore. But our circles, while they are in proximity to each other and may even connect to each other, do not overlap. They don't bleed into and inform one another. They are quite distinct. This is not a problem in and of itself, except that if we don't have a mechanism by which to talk between our circles, our communities, they often silo, they get compartmentalized, and they're very distinct from each other, not listening, not mutually informing. And that can be really problematic, especially in an era of social media, 24-hour news cycle, this political animosity that we live in. Everything is very inflamed right now. And so the other thing I like about this painting is that the circles are forefronted against larger and previous but faded circles that still echo or resonate, inform the image. They're not as influential or as prominent as they once were, but they were much bigger circles, and they are haunting the picture. They are still informing and echoing with their influence. This is actually, for me, a great picture of our current situation, because nearly anything you can name is a fragment, a remainder from a previous expression that may or may not be compatible or conversant with the newer expressions or different expressions. And so we live in this very fractured and fragmented world where so many things are leftovers or remnants or remainders from previous expressions, and yet they still hang around. They don't have the influence that they once had. And this applies to religions and Christian denominations, education theories, medical, pre-1975 military. I mean, so many examples that I can't even get started. But I think it's worth noting, if you get nothing else from this, I hope that the one thing that you'll kind of take in and think about is that nearly every element of our society is a remnant or a remainder from a previous expression at some level that echoes today and may not be compatible or conversant with newer expressions or other expressions that are linear. So this is a situation we have to address, because with our greater proximity, we are closer, our communities are more in touch with each other, but when they are not compatible, when they are not mutually informing and mutually edifying, something deep is lost. And the part that troubles me the most is that this individualism that we have, this mental fiction that we have been sold, denies, blinds us to the fact that nearly everything from procreating and raising the next generation to learning a language to earning a living, everything requires cooperation and mutuality. And that's what I want to address this week. I would love to hear your thoughts. I hope that you will tune in for the next 3 days. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.